Good afternoon and welcome to ACSM's first brown bag of the season. We are pleased to have Dr. James Navalta from UNLV, or University of Nevada, Las Vegas, with us. I'll do a quick introduction of Dr. Navalta and then we'll turn it over to him for his presentation. Dr. Navalta is an associate professor at UNLV. He joined the Department of Kinesiology and Nutrition Sciences in 2012. He teaches anatomical kinesiology and applied exercise physiology within the undergraduate department, and evaluation of physical work capacity and advanced exercise physiology within the graduate program. Dr. Navalta's research focuses on the immune response to exercise, physiological responses to outdoor exercise like hiking and trail running, and the validity of wearable technology. Dr. Navalta earned his bachelor's in physical education and biology from Brigham Young University, Hawaii, his master's in kinesiology from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and his PhD in exercise physiology from Purdue University. His previous teaching experience was at Southern Arkansas University and Western Kentucky University. He is the co-founder and an executive editor of the International Journal of Exercise Science. Welcome, Dr. Navalta.
Thank you. So I appreciate you tuning in to this webinar. I am at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. However, this research would not be possible without my colleagues at Southern Utah University, so I want to give them props. They're one of the premier outdoor recreation programs in the country. And I'm not sure if the Oregon Trail reference is too dated for some of you. I grew up in the era where we actually played the original game on our Apple IIe computers, but in any case, testing outside is very similar to playing the Oregon Trail. You have an expectation that it's going to go one way, and in reality, it usually turns out very different. John Muir is one of the first naturalists and conservationists, and one of his nicknames is the father of the national parks. And I'd like to think that this quote applies equally to research. There are many different research paths that you can take, and I encourage that every once in a while you take it outdoors where some of these things that you find in the laboratory can be applied. I do want to take care of the deserved appreciation up front, especially my colleagues at Southern Utah University. They're on the left-hand column, particularly Mark and Jake. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the graduate students and now some professionals who have made multiple trips out to the trail in the name of science. So over the next 20 to 25 minutes, there are three themes that I hope to share. First is why testing outdoors is necessary. Second are some of the hiking studies that we've done. And then finally, we're going to end up with how we've evolved to testing wearable technology outside. This slide is to illustrate the point that worldwide, our populations are becoming more and more centered in urban areas. You can see that in the USA, by this year, it's estimated that 85% of our population will be concentrated in towns and cities. Europe is 3/4 and growing, and then in Brazil, you can see that there's almost 90%. And there are several side effects to being clustered so closely together. Among these are an increase in stress, as well as an increase in anxiety in people that live in urban areas compared to those who live in the country. Living in a city, especially a city like Las Vegas, where I live, the lights are on all of the time. And this is because there are certain services that are available for 24 hours. And there are health consequences to artificially altering our circadian rhythm. And these include increases in cancer and increases in cardiovascular diseases and their risks. Lastly, with a large population comes the necessity of moving people from one place to another, and this contributes to an increase in pollution, among other factors. There are health consequences of pollution that include respiratory issues, such as asthma and lung damage, and pollution has also been linked to premature deaths. So in order to overcome the consequences of living urban that we've highlighted, there's an effort to reconnect people with nature. And I'm going to point out that this is a picture of my boys at Great Basin National Park. It's the only national park that's located entirely in Nevada, and it also happens to be the least visited out of all of the national parks. And I want to point out that, you know, they have huge smiles on their faces. It's the first time that we had gone, and this was a couple years ago, and we've made it an annual thing for us. So as our current population is, our current population is different from any other time in our history. This is due to us being more connected to our electronic devices. There are processes that are becoming more and more automated, and there's also the need, or there's a decreased need for physical activity as we move to more and more knowledge-based industries. So as more people from the current population try to reconnect with nature, especially through physical activity, we feel that it's important to investigate physiological effects and to provide scientific evidence for certain gateway activities such as hiking and trail running that we hope will become lifelong activities for individuals. So this is obligatory slide, trophy slide number 1, and you see these in a lot of these kind of presentations. Basically what I'm doing here is trying to provide evidence that we've published in the area, and I'm going to talk about 2 of our hiking studies that we've done. So there's a good amount of literature on green exercise, and green exercise is generally defined as performing exercise or some kind of physical activity in a green environment such as a forest. There are benefits to green exercise from factors from cancer to cardiovascular responses. As I sit here, I can look out my window and I don't see a lot of green. I live in Las Vegas, which is the desert, and we didn't know whether it had to be green or whether there were benefits to be had from exercising in the natural environment of a desert. And I'm going to call this affectionately brown exercise. In the US, there are areas, the areas with the largest population growth are happening in the desert, and you can see right now it's estimated that 25% of the population lives in these brown areas, and it's only going to increase and as more and more people move in. So we designed an investigation that was similar to the green exercise studies in the literature. We had participants spend time immersed in the environment, sitting, and then time walking in it. We took cardiovascular measures as well as perceptual measures. We had 5 different conditions. The laboratory, which I'm not going to show a picture of. We are conveniently located, our campus at UNLV is conveniently located to one of the most famous urban areas in the world, the Las Vegas Strip. So we had people walk around our campus. We also had 3 natural conditions. So we had a green condition up at the Briscoe Trailhead in Mount Charleston, which served as our green control. And then we had 2 brown conditions. The picture on the lower right-hand corner there is out at Red Rock National Recreation Area. And then we also tested out at Death Valley National Park, which was a below sea level brown condition for us. So when looking at cardiovascular responses, only 2 conditions really showed any kind of a difference. So you can see there that after sitting, heart rate in the green condition was lower than the urban condition. And this agrees with a large amount of the literature. The other thing that we saw was that heart rate after the walk was significantly greater in the below sea level condition. And it turns out that participants walked further in that condition, and we think that it's due to enjoyment of being in that environment. So because they walked more, then perhaps it's not surprising that heart rate was higher. Our perceptual measures of comfort and calm were also greater in the natural environments. So putting it all together, we didn't see a difference between green and brown environments. And our conclusion was that performing activity outside in a brown environment, such as in the desert where we live, is just as good as completing it in a green environment. So in the what do we learn category, it was really surprising how long it took to get approval from all of the government entities. In some cases, it took me cold calling different numbers from the website every day until I was connected with the right person. And this speaks to the need to be persistent. It was over a year from the time that I submitted our IRB application to receiving approval, and then it took another year to collect the data and then disseminate it. This next study was the first one that we did in collaboration with Southern Utah University. And among the different purposes that we had was that we wanted to see whether leisure hiking could meet the ACSM requirements for daily physical activity. We had participants complete an easy rated hike at 2 miles an hour. And this is the industry standard pace if you're going to take a group backpacking. And then on a different day, we asked participants to complete a more strenuous hike. And you can see there that it was almost at an 18% grade uphill for a mile. So looking at our methods, I'm just going to point out that we took blood pressure using a cuff and a stethoscope. And this is going to be important when we talk about what we learned later on. We calculated rate pressure product, which is an indicator of how much stress is being placed on the heart. And what we found was that hiking uphill places almost a quarter more stress on the heart than level walking. We thought that if you did this regularly, there might be a benefit to the cardiovascular system. In looking at heart rate as a percentage of the estimated maximum, we found that our leisure hiking protocol didn't quite meet the ACSM threshold for heart rate. But heart rate isn't the only game in town. So next we wanted to see if it was possible to meet the energy expenditure goal through leisure hiking. gave us a chance to utilize the ACSM metabolic equations that most of you are probably introduced to in your undergraduate exercise physiology labs. Since we knew the speed, we knew the percent grade, we knew the total time, we were able to estimate the total calories that were expended. And I don't know about you, but I don't take time to get out to a trailhead and then only hike for half an hour. So we thought that people were doing this regularly and hiking for a little longer than 34 minutes at a time each week, that it would be possible to accumulate enough energy expenditure to provide benefits. And we learned a few different things in this study. Remember, this was the first one that we had done outside. One of the big things that we learned was that doing research outside is a little different than in the laboratory where you can control everything. I'm just going to point out that we didn't consider how hard it would be to take a manual blood pressure in the wind on the top of a mountain. Luckily for us, what happened is that at the next ACSM National Conference, we were introduced to wearable technology. So this takes us into the other direction. So this is obligatory trophy slide number 2 that provides evidence that our group is capable of publishing in the area of wearables in the outdoors. We started with the Hexoskin Biometric Smart Shirt, and this returns a variety of measures, so it includes heart rate, ventilatory measures, and energy expenditure, and then some pace and step count measures. And what we decided to do was to replicate our earlier study to some extent. What we hoped to do was to determine retest reliability using this wearable technology out on the trail. Now, I'm also going to point out that we got a little smarter this time around. We took blood pressure using an automated device, although I'm not going to share the results of this data with you. And looking at our results, we found significant reliability measures for respiratory rate, as well as step count. You can see those highlighted there. However, none of the other measures met our threshold for reliability. Turns out that heart rate didn't register on half of our participants, and that we didn't realize this until we got back and we tried to download the data. So what we learned specific to the Hexoskin is that if heart rate drops, it automatically defaults to a reading of 70 beats per minute. And this also affects the energy expenditure reading. And what we concluded, and this is really a theme that runs throughout all of our wearable technology research, is that just because it works great in the laboratory or controlled setting, doesn't really mean that it's going to work out in the real world. The final study that I'm going to share with you involves step count validity of several different wearables during hiking and trail running. One thing that we've found is that in the wearable tech research, that everybody does validity, and it's, there are a lot of new wearable devices that continually are being introduced to the market, and it is difficult to keep up and try to validate them. One thing that we've noticed is that far fewer investigations are also incorporating reliability, and we believe that there's a big need in this regard. So the wearable tech research nowadays is calling for at least 20 participants, so we're able to, in this study, we were able to recruit the number that we needed. Also, kind of industry standards is that exercise bout should be of at least 5 minutes. So we use 5 minutes of walking along the trail, and then also 5 minutes of running, and we repeated them twice so that we could get both validity as well as reliability. And as far as our results go, we're looking for 3 things. We're looking for a mean absolute percent error, or a MAPE that you see there. And what we want is 10% or less. So the figure on the left-hand side shows the devices that met that threshold. We're also looking for a limit of agreement. This is what you get from your Bland-Altman plot. So the limit of agreements that fall into a narrower range, and you can see that on the figure in the middle at the bottom there. And then we're also looking for an interclass correlation coefficient of 0.7 or greater, and you can see those devices identified on the table on the right. And what we're looking for is a device that meets all three of those measures. So for hiking, there were 3 devices that met all 3 thresholds for step count. You can see those, the Leaf Health Tracker, the Garmin Vivo Smart Heart Rate Plus, and the Stride Power Meter. When trail running is considered, you can see that the same 3 devices were identified as being valid for the step count measurement. So like I said earlier, we feel that determining reliability is also important. And you can see the devices that were deemed to be reliable during hiking and trail running. They're shown in the boxes. And the one device that was found to be both valid and reliable for both hiking and trail running, step count, was determined to be the Stride Power Meter. So I'm going to end with what we've learned in general. Because you can't control everything, there are going to be times that don't go as planned. And because of this, it's a good idea to be flexible and to have backup plans where you can make the best out of being in that environment. Testing outside has also been instrumental in student involvement for our group, and then also in building cohesion for our research team. And then lastly, in showing that there are benefits to exercising in the natural environment. I appreciate being able to share our findings through this brown bag series. Thank you to Lynette for the invitation, and then also to Becky for making sure that everything has run smoothly from the technical side. That's my email information for anybody that has any questions outside of our question and answer period, or anybody that wants to collaborate or just pick my brain if you're interested in doing this kind of research.
Great, thank you so much. We appreciate your presentation. We do have a couple of questions, and just a reminder to the audience, you can submit your questions through the webinar platform, and we will read those on the call. Okay, so the first question is, how might someone account for elevation, uneven surfaces, things like that, when trying to estimate their energy expenditure?
That is a great question. We were fortunate in our testing that we didn't have too many of these elevation changes. Probably what I would do is break it into segments where you know this amount has an elevation change of, a particular amount, rather than doing it all at once. That's what I would recommend.
Great, thank you. The next question that we have is, how much does the Hexoskin Smart Shirt and Stride Power Meter, how much do those 2 items cost?
Let's see, so the Stride Power Meter we purchased most recently. You could get that for $200, but I saw that they've come out with an updated product that takes wind into account, and I think you can get that one for $220. The Hexoskin we purchased a couple of years ago, and we purchased it in a pack of 10, which is why we tested 10 participants in that particular study. I think that we got it for I think it's about $250 if you purchased an individual one, $200 or $300.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, our next question, have you taken a portable metabolic unit into the field or other mobile physiological devices?
We did. We did a trail running study where we took the K4 out into the field. I didn't share that one because I just shared our hiking studies, but yeah, we did a trail running study where we took it out and validated the energy expenditure using the Hexoskin against the K4.
Okay, let's see. What do you think about using the Stride power meter or other wearable technology to measure children during hiking and trail running?
I have not considered that. I think, I think the Stride might be good. In our trail, the hiking and the trail running studies, just because of the nature of the trail, you don't have an even gait. So I think I would be confident in using the Stride in children and the differences in gait that they have. I probably wouldn't be comfortable using any other device just because the ones that we used didn't turn out to be that great across the board.
Okay. Our next question, what are the population health implications for purchasing tracking devices given the variability and what is actually a reliable device that we should recommend to the public? So I'll read the first part of that again. What are the population health impacts for purchasing tracking devices given the variability?
Yeah, so let's see, I had a graduate student, Jeff Montez, that did a study and he looked at a number of different devices. And I think one of them, and I'm not going to tell you the name because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but one of them overestimated energy expenditure by quite a lot. So if somebody is using that particular device to track their energy expenditure, then they're thinking they're burning a lot more than they actually are. So I think there definitely are some health consequences. People aren't getting as much as far as exercise or energy expenditure that they think there are, and I think consequently they might not be doing as much if they're using that tracker. On the other side of it, I think there is some good research to show that using trackers can help people that are previously sedentary to get them going and moving more. So I think on the other side there is some benefit to using them. I personally use one, and I go out and I do my exercise and I have to upload it to Strava and some of your more kind of social media type of things.
Great, thank you. Our next question, what is the role of psychological constructs related to motivation, enjoyment, and perception of effort?
Good question. It's something that really we haven't looked a whole lot into. We've just been kind of taking these validated instruments and using them as tools, as measures, kind of like we were doing with the wearable technology, where they're returning certain measures. I think that's something that our group is definitely going to get into a lot more.
Okay, next question. How do you account for varying experiences with hiking, or were all of your subjects of the same hiking experiences?
That's a good question. We were able to recruit from the student population up there at Southern Utah, and because of that, then they were all very similar. I would imagine that if you have somebody that is, what they do is hike for exercise, that they would have different responses, and that's something that, as far as future studies, could definitely be done.
Let's see. We have a few more questions here. We actually have a lot of questions. People really like this.
Okay.
Have you considered examining physiological responses of trail running and walking during different seasons?
Yeah, we did consider that. Actually, that first study that I shared with you, where we were looking at green versus brown exercise, there was a component that what we wanted to do was test hiking in different times of the year, but because of how long it took for us to actually get approval, and we were coming under the gun as far as having to report. So the national parks actually has a really good system for reporting, and because of that, then we had to disregard the seasonal component of what we were looking for. But that is definitely something that has been on the radar, and I think it would make a difference. In Las Vegas, yeah, this is kind of the first day that we've dipped down into the 50s. I think it was 60 by the time I left the house. So we're now getting into the really good time as far as getting outdoors.
Good. Let's see. What is your recommendation for monitoring special populations, such as with chronic illnesses such as diabetes, to monitor energy expenditure and hiking?
That is a good question. I am not sure I've seen any literature on that. Outside of using one of those portable metabolic carts, I think there's a wide variety as far as validity in especially energy expenditure. So if you're looking at wearable technology as the thing that measures it, there seems to be, if you're looking at heart rate or step count or energy expenditure, those are the things that a lot of wearable technology devices return. Heart rate seems to be the best, step count is kind of in the middle, and then energy expenditure is all over the place. So I'm not sure that I could actually recommend anything that I would say you could use in a special population like that.
Sure. Okay. Our next question, what is the easiest way to get started with outdoor research? Collaborating with existing labs, or what would you recommend there?
So for us, it just happened that I had corresponded with Mark when I was at Western Kentucky, and then when I moved out here to Las Vegas, turns out that we were just a 2.5 hour drive from each other. And when we started our collaboration, neither of us had any experience doing outdoor research, but what we wanted to do was provide an opportunity, or basically an excuse, for me to bring our students from the city here in Las Vegas out to Utah. And there were some students that I had that had lived their whole lives here and had never even been up to see the mountains in Utah. So, answering the question, I would say just look at the literature, kind of see what's been done, and then go for it. I'm not sure you have to have any particular experience. I mean, we have learned a number of things by doing the studies that we have, and I'd be happy to talk with you and share even more of the things that we've learned for whoever it is that wants to get into it.
Excellent. Our next question connects back to process as well. What type of permissions are typically needed to conduct research in public lands, assuming that permission is required as part of the IRB process?
Yeah, so I'm going to say that permissions, I think, will most definitely be required. I initially submitted my application to our IRB here at UNLV, and then they said, oh, you need to get permissions from these outside places. If it's not happening on campus, then you need to get permissions. And it turns out that I had to get permission from the National Forestry Service, which is where Mount Charleston is. And that one was actually the easiest of them. It was an email, and I was fortunate to get connected with the right person straight off the bat. And what they said was, if you're not taking more than 20 people up there at any one time, then you should be good to go. And I was able to use that email as confirmation for our IRB. The National Park Service, they have a website that you go through, and it's an application process. And that one was actually really streamlined as well. It was the Bureau of Land Management that caused me all of the headaches, and that I couldn't find anybody to return a phone call or an email. And they're the ones that I ended up kind of cold calling, just numbers down the list, until I found somebody that would, number one, pick up the phone, and then number two, knew who to connect me to. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Great, thank you. The National Park Service has a citizen science program. Do you know if anything is being evaluated relating to hiking in that program, or if you're familiar with that?
I am not. I don't know the answer to either of the questions. I'm not familiar with it because we've gone through the research side, and yeah, I don't know if anybody is. I'm not sure.
Okay. Let's see. When testing validity and reliability of wearable technology, are you looking toward using a wearable to collect data or metadata to inform another study, perhaps on motivation or perception of effort?
So based on the results of that hiking and trail running study, we had identified the stride power meter as ideal for taking step count, and based on that, then we parlayed that into a trail running study that's a little bit further in distance. With the wearable tech stuff, you're supposed to record steps, and the research that we were doing outside, it wasn't feasible for us to be able to do that, particularly over kind of a long distance. So I guess the first part of that answer, yes, we were looking to kind of validate and determine reliability in something that would allow us to go a little bit further distances. And then the second part of that answer is no, we weren't looking to try to then tie it into perceptual or kind of those other types of measures. But it's something that I think definitely could be done.
Excellent. Okay, we'll do one more question here, and then we will thank you for your time. Has there been any research done in the space on mountain biking?
That is a good question. We are doing a study right now where we're trying to determine validity and reliability on a number of wearable technology devices in mountain biking. So as far as I know, there is nothing, but we hope to have something soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today. This was really interesting. You could tell by all the questions that we had, this group was really engaged. So from the national office, we will say thank you, and we will end the webinar with that. Thank you.